everybody to lesson 47. So we are working our way through the writing prophets, and we've almost finished with Daniel. Today's lesson will finish Daniel, most likely, unless we get bogged down somehow. So we've covered chapter 2, 7, 8, and 9. These are the main prophetic chapters. There's some other chapters that deal with relations with the king and things of that nature, and there are some visions that are connected with that, but those are not pertinent to the to eschatology, essentially. So today we're going to be looking at chapters 10 through 12, and this is the last vision of Daniel. These three chapters form one connected whole, and together they constitute the final vision given to Daniel. So we're going to work our way through each one. Now, I'm not quite sure how much to read, because we've got three chapters to get through. But this is it gives us the date in verse 1 of chapter 10, the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and Daniel had been, it says in verse 2, he had been mourning for 3 weeks. On the 24th day of the first month, he lifted up his eyes, verse 5, and looked, behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz. His body also was like beryl. His face had the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like flaming torches. His arms and feet like the gleam of polished bronze. And the sound of his words were like the sound of a tumult. Well, this is very reminiscent of Revelation chapter 1, where the Lord Jesus appears to John when he's on the Isle of Patmos. So, and then as Daniel sees this vision, he falls before the figure in worship, and he's not rebuked. So that's a strong clue that this is a pre-incarnate appearance of the Lord Jesus himself. Now, and he touches him, and in verse 10, and tells him that he's been sent to teach him some things. And there's some things in here describing how it took him 30 days or whatever it is to come, and he has finally arrived. Verse 14 is one that we do want to pay attention to. So the angel comes to make known to Daniel what will happen to the Jews in the latter days. Verse 14, now I have come to give you an understanding of what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision pertains to the days yet future. So he is announcing what this vision is all about. The rest of the chapter is further description, so I don't think we will spend much time on that. But the vision will cover, it says, many days. So it's not one single event. It refers to many events that are going to come about. So that moves us to Daniel chapter 11. See how quick that was from one chapter to the next? All right, so Daniel 11. Now for this one, I think I'll read through, let's see, I'll read through verse 9 to get us started. In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement to and a protection for him. Now this is the angel speaking. And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them, as soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he'll arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them. Then the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. His domain will be a great dominion indeed. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangement. But she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up, along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, as well as he who supported her in those times. But one of the descendants of her line will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he will deal with them and display great strength. Also their gods and their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold he will take into captivity to Egypt. And he on his part will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years. Then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land. Now, you read all that passage, and you think, what in the world is going on? Now, some years ago, we did go through chapter 11, especially. This is when we were doing our Through the Bible series. If you, some of you have given the DVD for that, and if you go into the intertestamental period of that DVD, there are some messages in the Bible study section where we talk about this very passage and go in detail, point by point, about what is happening. Now, I'm going to talk about some of it in just a moment. Debbie's raised her hand, so go ahead and.
Okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't quite listening when you began.
Yes.
But I wondered, did you say that the angel in verses whatever?
Yes.
Did you say it was Christ?
Well, it seems to me that it might be because of the appearance and the fact that he accepts worship from Daniel.
Oh, okay.
And then
I guess I have a note in my Bible, probably from Constable, that said, likely an angel, not Christ, see verse 13.
Oh, okay.
Talk about Michael.
Yes, but it says Michael came to help him.
Oh,
and so in verse 13. So that's why I think, well, okay. Anyway, but the appearance is so much like Revelation chapter 1. It seems.
Oh,
you see,
okay.
So that's why. Okay.
I gotcha. Okay, sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, better late than never. Anyway. Okay, so let's start working our way through here, and we're going to just try to give some of the details here. Now, the first point is secular history confirms the first part of this prophecy, verses 1 through 35. And so, as you work, if you understand the history of all of this, some of these references start making sense. So, the first 4 verses talk about these empires. So we're talking about the Persian Empire. 4 more kings are going to come, 3 or 4 more kings, whatever it was. And then one is going to arouse the king of Greece. Well, that's Alexander. Alexander comes in and, of course, gains great power very swiftly, but then his kingdom is broken up. That's all familiar from the other visions. All right. Now, he talks about this king who is strong. Says the king of the south will grow strong, along with one of his princes. But then a king of the north will come in who will be strong above the king of the south. Okay, one of his princes who will gain ascendancy over him to obtain dominion. So this is what we're going to enter in this section, is the competition between the Seleucids, which were basically located in Syria, in the north. This is relative to Israel, north of Israel. So Syria, Iraq, Iran, all of that area, basically controlled by the Seleucids. And Seleucus is the first one. And then the king of the south, I'll just identify these terms. I think it's in the notes here a little bit, but he's the, that's the king of Egypt, and that's Ptolemy. Okay, so the kings of the north were from Syria. The kings of the south were from Egypt. So these are the, I guess I should have put this on. I'm explaining it without giving you the notes. All right, so The daughter of Ptolemy II was married to Antiochus II. That's verse 6. Talks about the daughter of the king of the south going to the king of the north. So Antiochus is the son of Seleucus, son or grandson. And so they create an alliance. There's a battle, and they decide to have peace. And so this is a typical thing that happens. The daughter gets sent off to marry the foreign king. And she's sort of a guarantor against further hostilities. All right. Now, it goes down. It's referring in verse 7 and 8. It's referring to a different king of the south, Ptolemy III. And he is the last strong ruler in the south, but he makes peace with the king of the north. And let's see. And then Antiochus III, let's just back up. We've got all these names. All right, so the daughter of Ptolemy II was married to Antiochus II. So that would be, the daughter there is Ptolemy III's sister. So they have this peace deal. And then along comes Antiochus III. Okay, now I've got myself. Here we go. All right, and he breaks the peace deal. So in verse 10, he comes up. His sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war up to his very fortress. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. So there's Antiochus III. In verse 11, he's rising against the king of the south. And when the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up. He will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. For the king of the north will again rise, a greater multitude than the former. And after an interval of some years, he'll press on with a great army and much equipment. Okay, so we've got all these names in here, and it's not really important for us to know these names. And as I say, in that Through the Bible series, I have more details on this. And that the audio of this might be on the church website. I can't quite remember if it is. But anyway, Ptolemy IV defeated Antiochus III, but did not take advantage of his victory. So that's verses 11 and 12. So Antiochus III, in verses 13 to 15, comes and retakes Palestine. All right, so where did I end? I think I stopped with verse 13, but I'm going to now carry on, and I want to see how far I want to get to. I want to get to verse 17. So for the king of the north will again rise, a greater multitude than the former. After an interval of some years, he'll press on with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. Then the king of the north will come, cast up a siege ramp, and capture a well-fortified city. And the forces of the south will not stand their ground, nor not even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him. He will also stay for a time in the beautiful land, with destruction in his hand. He will set his face to come with power of his whole kingdom, bringing with him a proposal of peace which he will put into effect. He will also give him the daughter of women to ruin it, but she will not take a stand for him or be on his side. All right, so let's just fill in a few of these notes. Antiochus III is then going to take Jerusalem, verse 16. That's the reference to the beautiful land. And finally, Antiochus III is going to marry his daughter to Ptolemy V. And so we're down another couple generations in the Ptolemies. Let's see. And then verse 18 and 19 continue on. He will turn to face the coastlands and capture many, but a commander will put a stop to his scorn against him. Moreover, he will repay him for his scorn. So he will turn his face toward the fortresses of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and be found no more. All right. And so Antiochus III is going to come to his end. And then let me just move on. Antiochus Epiphanes is going to arise, and he's the vile person who's described in detail in the next several verses. I'm not sure. Verse 21 says, then in his place one, or verse 20, then in his place one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom. Yet within a few days he will be shattered, though not in anger nor in battle. In his place a despicable person will arise, on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred. But he will come from in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. The flowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered on also the prince of the covenant. After an alliance is made with him, he will practice deception. He will go up and gain power with a small force of people. In a time of tranquility, he will enter the richest parts of the realm. He will accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. Let's see. I want to move down. He's battling back and forth with the kings of the south. Verse 20. Let's see. Let's see. Down to the end, I guess. Verse 32, by smooth words he will turn to godlessness those who act wickedly toward the covenant, but the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many, that they will fall by sword and by flame, by captivity, by plunder for many days. And when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy. Some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. So what we have there is the rise of the Maccabees, who are going to throw off Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, he'll gain the kingdom, it says, by flatteries and by intrigue. I don't think he was the oldest son, and he comes and overthrows the rightful king. And he is typical of the Antichrist. So that's where we are. This is all historical, and we come up with the Maccabees. These are the let's see, verse 32 or 33. Those who have insight will give understanding. They are going to rise against this king. Verse 32 says, the people who know their God will display strength and take action. That's the Maccabees revolting against Antiochus Epiphanes and taking the kingdom as an independent kingdom for a period of time. All right, I saw a hand raised. It's either Rob or Maureen, so jump in there.
Yeah, it's Rob this time. One statement and one question. So in verse 17, just to make this sort of more relevant to the history that most of us know, rather than all these names that were sort of cloudy, is I understand that the Ptolemy V married from the north. This is where Cleopatra comes in.
Right.
This is Cleopatra of the the historic even the plays of Shakespeare, right?
Right.
So that's the actual Cleopatra. And then I understand, and this is my question too, is that verse 18, and they're talking about this sort of prince of his own behalf and stuff. And so you would know this, Pastor. Is this where there's something to do with, there's a sort of transition to the control of the Roman Empire somewhere in here?
It will come after the Maccabees. That's the... And I believe Cleopatra would be the daughter of Ptolemy V, wouldn't she?
Oh, I think you're right. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, what happens is, I don't want to get too much sidetracked into the history, but we will. It is important to some extent. So the Antiochus Epiphanes comes against the southern kingdom, and he is rebuffed. they are able to stop him, and he's so angry he takes it out on Jerusalem. And it's not mentioned here. I think it was mentioned in one of the other prophecies in chapter maybe chapter 8, but he puts the abomination of desolation on the sacrifices that on the altar in Jerusalem, and well, that's where he sacrifices a pig on the altar, and that's of course a great offense to the Jews. He also puts up a statue of Zeus in the temple, and so this priestly family, the Maccabees, they get angry, obviously, about this, and so they decide to have a revolt, and the Jews join with them, and the sons of the priest who revolts, one of them becomes the king of Jerusalem, basically. And at this point, the kings of the Seleucid kings and the kings of Egypt are not as strong as they once were. So the Jews are able to have an independent kingdom for a period of time. And that also, during this time, the Roman Empire is starting to expand towards the east. And with the Maccabees, there came a period, there was a few generations, maybe 20 years where they're independent. I can't remember the exact number. But after one of the kings dies, there's a succession struggle. So that creates instability in Palestine. So the Romans don't like instability. So they say, okay, we're taking over. So that's their justification. And their occupation of Jerusalem happened somewhere in this time frame. I don't remember all the dates. And of course, the Jews much resented it. And they also then sort of start to dominate Egypt. Cleopatra is still a queen in this time period, somewhere in there, but she is not, she isn't strong like the Egyptian pharaohs used to be, and so then eventually, when she dies, Egypt becomes just a province of Rome. So that's how some of the secular history works. But basically, if you got a good commentary that can work you through these first 35 verses and tell you exactly which kings were which, you got kings of the south and kings of the north. You must realize that as we're going through this, there's different generations. So there, we've got all these Ptolemies, Antiochuses, and all of this, and so it's quite confusing when you try to read it. And however, the reason that it's there, I think, is because Antiochus Epiphanes. Well, there's two reasons. One is because God, the angel is telling Daniel about what's going to happen to Israel. So Israel's in the middle between these two kingdoms. So they get fought over this whole time. So for one period, they're under the Egyptians. For another period, they're under the Syrians, and back and forth, back and forth. And then, of course, the Antiochus Epiphanes, he desecrates Jerusalem and causes the revolt, and the Jews take over their own kingdom. All right, but that's not really eschatology. That's just setting the stage. And that's why I'm not spending a lot of time on the detail. I've done the detail, as I say, in this other session, in much more detail. So the big part for eschatology is what happens next. And so that's what we're going to spend a little bit more time on. And I'm going to read verses 36 to the end of the chapter, and then we'll start working through the next little bit here. Then the king will do as he pleases. Now this is a different king. This is the Antichrist, I believe. Then the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods, and he will prosper until the indignation is finished, for that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers, or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above them all. But instead he will honor a god of the fortresses, a god whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. He will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who acknowledge him and will cause them to rule over the many and will parcel out land for a price. At the end time, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships. And he will enter countries, overflow them, and pass through. He will also enter the beautiful land, and many countries will fall. But these will be rescued out of his hand, Edom, Moab, and the foremost of the sons of Ammon. Then he will stretch out his hand against other countries, and the land of Egypt will not escape. But he will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. But rumors from the east and from the north will disturb him, and he will go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. He will pitch tents of his royal pavilion between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him. All right, so let's just start working through these notes. All right, so the willful king here is the Antichrist. This is the last part of the vision, now jumping forward to the time of the end. It actually goes right through chapter 12 as well. The willful king is the Antichrist. He will magnify himself above all gods. I'm not sure why I have a paragraph there. I must have mistyped that line. Okay. He will speak marvelous things against the true God. He will prosper until the indignation be accomplished. All right. He will be a very unnatural person, verse 37. He will not regard the God or gods of his forefathers. Some interpreters insist that the Antichrist is a Jew. I'm not absolutely sure that's so. This does not determine that he is a Jew, for Gentiles also have ancestral gods. So it's one of those lines where there's some debate. He will not have a regard for women's gods or for any god. So that you get these things in the lines here in the text, and it's all kind of strange as we read it, but it's talking about this strange apparition of this person. Right? He will honor a strange god of forces, verses 38 to 39, and this is connected possibly with Satan in Revelation 13. And he will divide the land of Palestine for gain, and at the time of the end, the kings of the north and of the south will come against him. And you remember that vision of Ezekiel with the Gog and Magog coming from the north, and also seemingly coming from the south as well. He shall occupy the land of Palestine. It says, Egypt will not escape. Many lands will be under occupation. The tidings out of the east and the north will trouble him. And he will go forth with fury to destroy. But then finally, he will set up his palace in Palestine, but however, he will come to his end. No one will help him. All right, so the point is, all of these events take place during the tribulation. This is man's last rebellion before God sets up his kingdom. All right, and the language goes back and forth, and there's a lot of details here that we're just skimming over really rapidly. But that's the basic picture of what's happening at the end of this chapter. All right, any comments or questions there? No guarantees I can answer all of them, but that's all right. Go ahead, Robert. Maureen.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, just a comment I think I've learned over the last 10 years is that, the Jews seem to say Jewish people who have come to Christ, in general, this is a generalization, they'll lean towards the idea that the Antichrist is a Jew. Well, I heard a former Muslim speaking who came to Christ. So he's an Arab, Walid Shubat. Heard him about 10 years ago, and he thinks the Antichrist is a Muslim. but his heritage is Islam, you see. So it
Right.
seems like people have trying to make it say something it's not, and there's arguments on both sides. But in general, I don't think, from my experience, the Bible's really clear on that. It's just saying that this is a non-religious person, and they're not interested. Their God is the military, is power, not the gods of their fathers. I think, you know.
That's right, and I think that's accurate. I think like there's a great, that's probably a good example. You know, I've talked about how we like to identify. We want to be certain about all this prophecy stuff. And as you can see, I mean, you read through this chapter, just sit down and read through this. And I've given you a little bit of an explanation. And without any, but if you sort of leave your mind out, I mean, your memory of what I've just said out of your, you know, your memory banks, read through the chapter again, and you're going to say, what? It's unclear. Now, when you start examining history and you say, okay, gods of the north and gods of the south, I mean, kings of the north and kings of the south, okay, we see how this empire, the part about Greece, that's clear. The Grecian empire was broken into 4 pieces, that's clear. And so then we can start working through the king of the north and the king of the south, and you read the history of this time, and okay, that lines up with this, and that lines up with this. We can see the rise of the Maccabees there at the end of that section. And then there's this last king. Well, he doesn't resemble anybody from history. He does resemble these figures that we see in the in Daniel chapter 8, and the little horn and the boastful tongue and the things that are said. He resembles that. Later on, when you get into the book of Revelation, he resembles the beast, who is, you know, as we take it, he's the Antichrist. Of course, John gives him that number 666 and all those things, and all of these things seem to tie together. So we identify him. We have to say that's an interpretation, because the language that is given to us here isn't highly specific. So we're collating passages, and we're putting all this stuff together and sort of harmonizing different passages that seem to teach us these things. So I think this is a good example in this particular prophecy of, there's detail, you know, obviously there's details given to us, but there's tantalizing other details we'd like to know, and they're not given to us. So I try to be careful and not read too much into any one of them. And that's, Rob, thanks for that comment, because it does show how, you know, Bible believers, in their desire for certainty, will have conflicting ideas, you know, and you know, that's just something that happens in all of this study. Okay, so any other comments on chapter 11? We're probably going to have a shorter study this week because of, I just wanted to finish up Daniel, as we seemed like a good place to end for today. Okay, so let's go to Daniel 12, and I think I'll read the whole chapter this time. It's a shorter chapter. It's just 13 verses. Now here Michael is appearing. So now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, those to everlasting life, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the time of the end. Until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, 2 others were standing, one on this bank of the river, and the other on that bank of the river. And one said to the man dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, How long will it be until the end of these wonders? I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. And as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. As for me, I heard, but I could not understand. So I said, my Lord, what will be the outcome of these events? He said, go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the end time. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. How blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1,335 days. But as for you, go your way to the end, then you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age. Those last verses of Daniel always stir me. For the promise that God gives personally to Daniel in those verses. All right, so let's start working through these notes so we understand a little bit about what's going on here. Okay, so at that time, Michael will stand up for the Jews, and he appears to be the angel that is especially connected with the Jewish nation. Notice this is the time of Jacob's trouble, the time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation. But the elect Jews will be delivered from it, right? They will escape this. And this will be, as it says, this will be a time of such trouble as men have not yet seen. So that connects us with Matthew 24, verses 21 and 22. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So this is clearly talking and connecting this event with the Jews. The Great Tribulation is about the Jews and what God is finally doing with the Jewish nation. All right? So next, there will be a resurrection to life for some and to contempt for others. Now, we have to note this is a general view of the resurrection. Notice that's plural there. Daniel is not trying to make fine distinctions in the time sequence, but I'm going to just have one more note. Pentecost, Dwight Pentecost, holds that this is a resurrection of Jews only at the close of the tribulation period. I'm just going to stop and explain for a second here. Other passages make it clear that there are different resurrections. They happen at different times. And the resurrection of the unjust happens at the great white throne judgment at the end of time. And so there's a wide difference between the resurrection of those who are rising to everlasting life in Daniel 12, verse 2, and those who are rising to contempt. So there's a lot of period of time. Daniel isn't trying to make those distinctions, but there are many. It's quite clear from other passages that there is a time gap. Now, Dwight Pentecost, who is a fine teacher, holds that this is a resurrection of Jews only. And this is in keeping with a view that many dispensationalists have held over the years, that the church is raised at the beginning of the tribulation, at the rapture, and then the Jewish saints are raised at the end of the tribulation. Now, I have to say, my avatar or my little window is covering this. I got to remember when I do this. Although hopefully we'll be doing this in person in the church, so I won't have to have this have Zoom on this anymore. But anyway, what my comment is, Pastor Don strongly disagrees with Pentecost on this point, based on Matthew 8:11. So here's Matthew 8:11. I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. And so I take this to be a reference to the marriage supper of the Lamb, and I think others have as well. So Abraham and Isaac and Jacob happen to be Jewish saints, Old Testament saints. So if they're there with us at this feast, that occurs after the rapture. So the Jewish saints have to be raised earlier. So I don't agree with Pentecost on this particular point. But anyway, it's noted. All right, so we'll move on. Okay, at this time, he says, the soul winners will appear in their true light. They will shine, he says, brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven. They are people who are truly wise. They will shine as the stars forever. Cast your note. Two signs of the end time in verse 4. Many shall run to and fro. It will be a time of great concern and disasters and stresses. And knowledge shall increase, it says. Also during this time in verse 4. All right, the great tribulation of 3.5 years will break the power of the Jews. And verse 7 tells us that that it's time and times and half a time, so 3.5 years. And then if you look at the end, when he verse 12, where he's talking about the number of days, again, those are basically 3.5 years. So it's there's a significance to each of those numbers, but we're not going to take the time to look at that today. But they're basically 3.5 years. All right. The tribulation will try and purify many. However, the wicked will persist in their sins and will not understand. And there's the difference between the 1,290 days and the 1,335 days indicates, I wonder if I've got that right. That's only 45, according to my calculations. I have here in the notes there will be a period of 75 days after the tribulation before the full blessing of the millennium comes. So perhaps I either have a typo or there's some other explanation for where these 75 days show up in the calculations. Anyway, that's not the important thing. It does seem to indicate there is a time lapse after the end of the tribulation, the Battle of Armageddon, and then the full kingdom coming in. All right, I'm guessing that's Rob wanting to explain my error.
Yeah, I've just got a little note here. Yeah, it is 75 days. It's the 45 plus 30 as mentioned a little bit earlier. I'd have to look at it, but it is 75.
Oh, okay. All right. So the number is right, and I don't see where I got it from. Okay, I'm just following Custer's notes on this. I haven't delved into this too deeply. I did want to get through all three of these chapters, and we sort of rushed through. This is not. We're getting the details. I'm just trying to get you familiar, expose you to these prophecies. They're not the most important, in a sense, they're not the most important ones in Daniel, partly because they're a little bit difficult to follow. As we've seen, just reading through this, the king of the south and the king of the north and all of this, like, who are these people? So it is a little harder to follow. Some of the others in Daniel are very clear what he's talking about. And again, this whole section, because of the accuracy, when they go back and forth between the king of the north and the king of the south, historically that is quite accurate. It's another reason why liberals approach Daniel and they try to say, oh, he was written much later. This wasn't written in the 500s by Daniel. It couldn't have been because he's so accurate. So they say it was written by somebody after the fact, maybe by one of the Maccabees or in that time period. And so that whenever you hear people saying things like that, you can tell that they don't really believe the Bible. Because how in the world could anything so supernatural happen? Well, God is supernatural. And so God can tell his prophets anything he wants to, and it will come to pass. So this is what gives us a great deal of confidence that the parts that are not yet fulfilled will be fulfilled someday. All right, so that wraps up our Daniel study. I have some references there, some books if you want to read more about Daniel. Custer includes one in and around the book of Daniel by somebody named Boutflower. I'm not quite sure how you say his name. He says some amazing insights, but also liberal ideas. So it's interesting that he's not shying away from reading books from people who oppose, but you don't want to be influenced by the liberal ideas that don't believe the Bible. So I've got a note coming from my wife. Looks like here. Okay, I got the note, so I will inform you of that shortly. All right, so any last questions here? And this could be on anything on Daniel that maybe you would like to come back. All right, so Rob or Maureen?
Sorry, it's just me this time. Do you have any, what are some of the thoughts just about the difference of those time, like the...
I didn't look into that one for this. You'd have to look that up.
Okay.
And there is a reference in Revelation to these numbers as well. I don't remember if they're exactly the same. It seems to me that they're like this, but it's a level of detail I didn't want to get into for this particular study. I don't want to put you off. Basically, it's 3.5 years, so that's the big thing, and that's again referring to this Great Tribulation. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right, Cal.
Hi again. I was just wondering about verse 3. In your notes, you call them the soul winners. So
yes,
is that what we're all called to do? Is to spread the gospel, and if we win a soul, we become stars in heaven, or what?
Well, I'm not. Okay, so first of all, I'm not quite sure if that means it will literally shine, but I think that there is a God. We are called to be soul winners. So Matthew 28, go into all the nations and make disciples, and other passages like that. So we are called to do that. Now, some people seem to be more fearless than others, and but we all can have an opportunity, even those of us who are more timid than others. And I think it's important to be a witness, and you never know what will happen. And my uncle told me a story many years ago. Oh, he had witnessed to a guy, and the guy didn't, he sort of rejected him, and I don't know if it was on the doorstep or if he knew the guy or how it all happened. But anyway, he sort of, at that time, nothing happened. Well, some years later, he got a letter from that same guy, and the guy said, "I just want you to know I've become a Christian." And so you never know. And, I'll have to, as I tell that story, I'm reminded of something that happened to me. When we started in Victoria here back in the 80s, and of course I was selling real estate. The church was very small. We didn't have any, I think the church paid me $100 a month, and that was just sort of we didn't have a very big offering. I don't remember how much we had back then, but certainly there wasn't very much. And I was selling real estate, and I had this crazy character I met. I mean, he was, he's one of these typical Victoria people. He was just so off the wall. He lived in the gorge, and he was talking about selling his house, and he had all kinds of plans. Anyway, I spent a lot of time with him. I never did sell him anything, but along the way, we did have some religious discussions. Well, time went on. He sort of never turned out into anything real estate-wise, and then he moved away. But I got an email from him, again, several years later. He was in Ontario. He says, "I want you to know I've become a Christian." And so what I'm saying is, just be a witness. And what this verse is telling us is there is some recognition for your efforts in doing that. And what that exactly is, I mean, it's, it talks about shining brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven. Well, that sounds pretty good, whatever it is. But it is it's sort of an encouragement, because as you witness, you don't know what God's going to do in somebody else's life. And this is a great encouragement to be a witness. So I hope that helps. And I thought I saw Rob stick his hand up there as well. Or maybe it was just an accident. I don't know. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Sorry, Rob does have a question, but I just thought I would just throw in my 2 cents about what Cal said. Like, I've always thought of this verse as just something that describes what God sees as the beauty of somebody who is speaking the truth and trying to win people from, eternal punishment. That it's a very, I don't know, I just always think it's a very beautiful thing that is portrayed. It's sort of like a simile of the, Jesus is the light of the world. And when we speak about who he is, we're sharing his light to other people.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right. So does Rob have a question then?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I certainly, if anyone wants to borrow a commentary or two on Daniel, I've got some good ones that Pastor would agree with, and John Whitcomb and stuff. Ironsides is fairly short and brief, so it's a good overview.
Yeah.
But John Whitcomb's a little more detailed. He's a professor of was a professor of Old Testament history, so anyone can get a hold of me if they want to borrow anything on this.
Sure. Yeah, and the ones that I have listed here, these are probably hard to find. These are older ones. They're probably out of print. I haven't checked. They just are. I just threw them up because they're in my notes. All right. Any other last questions? Okay. Well, let's have a word of prayer and we'll close our study for today. Our Father, we thank you for this time. We pray for your blessing on our understanding. We've had sort of an amazing set of chapters to go through today, and some of it is hard to understand. And so, Lord, we pray that you'll help us to trust you, even though we don't understand everything, and to hang on to those details that we do understand. We thank you that you chose to reveal these things to Daniel, and that they help us as we put together a picture from the various passages in the Bible of what your plan is for this world. It helps us to trust you and to know that even though things seem to be getting very crazy and strange these days, that you are in control and that your will be accomplished in the end. And so we trust in you for that, and we will continue to walk with you and be faithful. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.